As a punch needler, my work consists of making my own designs and recreating or adapting from things around me. The latter has some risks. I may be a law school dropout, but I know enough to know that using someone else's work without their permission is a big no-no. So I'm always looking for inspiration in ways where I won't end up in court. And I learned that the Metropolitan Museum of Art has an entire collection of open access artworks, which was absolute music to my ears. I thought it would be a fun exercise to recreate one of these artworks with punch needling. Enter Basket of Flowers by Leopoldine Kolbe. I hope I pronounced that right. There's no particular reason for why I chose this 116-year-old piece. I just thought it was cute. It would look good on something like a tote bag and would be fun to punch needle. And that's what I did. I recreated the original artwork in Procreate and divided the piece into a grid. I then made similar grid lines on my monk's cloth. So basically 2 inches by 2 inches. I sketched it out by matching the two grids, and I did deviate from the original artwork slightly. I changed the colors a little bit, and I changed the look of the basket as well. The woven basket in the original artwork was so nice, but I didn't know if I could make it work with the punch needle, so I just made it solid instead. I always like to start off by punching the borders, and I did this using an Oxford 14 fine punch needle and worsted weight yarn. I'm not using a gripper frame this time around, but a Morgan's no-slip hoop. There isn't any particular reason apart from not really needing the extra space. And as you can see, I'm resting it on a laptop stand. Don't laugh at me for this. I don't do this regularly. I normally have my no-slip hoop in my lap, but for filming purposes, I used this stand. It works really well, actually, so if you have one lying around in your house, try it out. You'll notice that I made 2 rows of a border, and there is a gap between these 2 rows. I skipped a row there so that the loops on the other side won't crowd together. I then punched the white basket with an Oxford 13 fine punch needle, which makes slightly taller loops than the 14, because I wanted the basket to slightly pop from the background. So I kind of regret punching this because I'm using frogged yarn from a previous punch needle project, and it's really bumpy and basically made my loops super messed up on the other side, even though I punched them in perfectly. So, pro tip, straighten out your frogged yarn before reusing it. I ended up doing that and repunching it off camera. After finishing the basket, I punched in some of the leaves and yellow flowers. I used the Oxford 10 fine punch needle, which you can probably guess is taller than the 13, so that the foliage could stand out the most. This was kind of a test, just to see how I should punch needle these elements so that the loops won't be overcrowded. What I can say is that you can definitely take some liberty with the stitch sizes here. Even if your loops are a little further apart, the background that you'll be punching in at the end will push them together. I then continued punching in the yellow flowers. I started on these before the leaves because some of the leaves in this piece are overlapping the bigger flowers, so I figured the best way to do this would be to punch the yellow flowers in first because they aren't overlapping anything. The big flowers were also punched with the Oxford 10 fine, and I started on them from the inside out so that the loops on the other side would look more natural to depict the actual bloom of the flower. So I started on the brown center and then the pink lower petals. I had to pause on those for a bit to also punch in the red highlights because I kind of forgot about those. Oops. And then I continued on with the rest of the flower. Now there are 2 points that I want to highlight here. Number 1, for things like single lines or small accents, make smaller stitches with your needle so that the resulting loops will actually show up on the other side. And number 2, after every section I'm punching, I'm turning my hoop around to snip and poke. This means snipping off my yarn tails to match the rest of my loops and poking the loops around so that they're in the right place. I cut out most of the footage of me doing this, but I cannot stress how important it is. So this is what the design looks like with all of the flowers and everything punched in. As you can see, all of the leaves have blended together and the yellow flowers as well. These flowers stayed pretty intact as well as the basket, but everything else just looks like green and yellow blobs. What's going to change this is filling in the background. So that's what we're going to do next. The borders are done in straight lines, and I started filling in the background like this as well, going back and forth. But for the background behind the flowers and leaves, what I'll have to do first is punch around them so that they maintain their shape. Once I do that, I can return to punching in the rest with straight lines. Going back to the Oxford 14, I filled in the background. My tip for filling in the background is to make smaller stitches around the various elements, such as the flowers, leaves, and the basket, so that they're clearly defined on the other side, and then just filling in the rest of the space as you please, so that your piece isn't overcrowded. Like I said before, I like going back and forth in straight lines, but you can do whatever you want. There are no rules here. So no one told me that I was saying this wrong. It's mitered corner, not metered corner. I'm pissed. I'm so mad. But anyways, we'll be doing a mitered corner on this piece to hem it. But first, we always steam press it by putting a wet towel on our work and then ironing. This helps it lie flat and settle any remaining uneven loops. I then drew a 2-inch border around my piece and then cut off the corners so that only 3/4 of an inch of fabric was remaining. I then ironed the corners flat, and then the sides, and then folded them all in, pinned, and ready to sew. Reuse your materials by using monk's cloth strings to hem your work. You can use any stitch you want. I'm just doing a whip stitch because I only need to hem it together. No one's going to see the back. Once I reach a corner, I sew it together to the top, taking my needle under to the other side to continue whip stitching. And now we've got a hemmed punch needle piece ready to attach to a tote bag. But before attaching it, I always use a sticky roller and lint remover to get rid of all of the fuzz that's accumulated on my work. Now, I've talked many a time about how much I hate using glue in punch needling, but I've also mentioned that glue is sometimes unavoidable, and this is one of those times. This design is going on a tote bag, you're putting things in, taking them out. My worry was that something could get caught on the stitches or in the interfacing, so my best alternative was to glue it. I used a fabric glue for this, and I only applied it to the hem of the piece, so no glue was touching any of the yarn. I let the glue set for about 72 hours, or 3 days, and then ironed it so that it stayed permanent. And here is the final tote bag. It's super cute and artsy. You can literally take it anywhere. You can do some shopping, lunch with your besties, a trip to the art gallery. But yeah, thanks for watching, and thanks for listening to me, by the way. More of you who watch me are subscribed, but not nearly enough. So if you like this video, you should like and subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. Thanks again to the Met for making so much art available for creatives to use. Comment below if I should do more of these art recreations or anything else I should do.